Before I begin, I just want to say thank you. Thank you for clicking on this video, for giving me your time, for listening. When you spend decades feeling invisible, feeling like your voice doesn't matter, having someone actually listen, even a stranger on the internet, it changes something inside you. If this story resonates with you, if it makes you feel less alone, please consider subscribing. Every subscription, every comment, every moment you spend here tells me that maybe my voice does count after all. Now, let me tell you what happened to me. The rain was coming down hard that Tuesday morning in April 2019. I remember because I was staring out the window of our bedroom in Tacoma, Washington, watching the drops race down the glass, thinking how strange it was that the weather matched exactly how I felt inside, cold, gray, and falling apart. My name is Margaret Ann Foster, and I was 63 years old the day my life split cleanly in half. I'd woken up that morning with the pain again. It had been there for months, this dull ache in my lower abdomen that I kept telling myself was nothing. I was good at that, telling myself things were nothing. When you spend 42 years married to a man like Gerald, you get very good at minimizing your own discomfort. You learn to be small. You learn to not take up space. You learn that your pain is always less important than his schedule, his golf game, his conference calls with the investment firm where he'd worked for 37 years. Gerald was in the bathroom, doing his morning routine. I could hear the electric razor buzzing, the water running, the same sounds I'd heard every single morning since 1977. We had a rhythm, Gerald and I. I woke up first, made the coffee, set out his vitamin supplements in the little blue dish by his placemat. He came down at exactly 6:45, drank his coffee while reading the Wall Street Journal on his iPad, and left for work at 7:30. We rarely spoke during this routine. There was nothing left to say that hadn't been said 1,000 times before. But that morning, I knew I had to break the pattern. The pain had gotten worse, sharp, urgent, wrong. "Gerald," I said when he came into the kitchen. He was wearing his gray suit, the one I'd picked up from the dry cleaners on Saturday. "I think I need to see a doctor today." He didn't look up from his iPad. "What's wrong now?" The now stung, like it always did, like I was constantly complaining, constantly needing something, when the truth was I almost never asked for anything. "I've been having pain for a while. It's getting worse." "Take some Tylenol," he said, sipping his coffee. "I have a meeting at 9 that I can't miss. Thompson's flying in from Chicago." "I think it might be serious, Gerald." He finally looked at me then, and I saw the flash of annoyance cross his face. It was the same expression he'd given me when I asked him to come to our daughter's college graduation, when I needed him to help me move my mother into assisted living, when I had asked, just once, if we could take a vacation together. Just the two of us. We never did take that vacation. "How serious?" he asked. "I don't know. That's why I need to go to the doctor." He sighed, that long, suffering sigh that made me feel like a burden. "Fine. I'll take you to urgent care after my meeting. Can you wait until noon?" The pain answered for me, sharp and insistent. "I don't think so." Another sigh. He pulled out his phone and called his assistant. I heard him explain that he'd be late, that something had come up with his wife. The way he said wife sounded like an obligation, a checkbox on his daily to-do list between conference call and lunch meeting. We drove to Multicare Tacoma General Hospital in silence. Rain hammered the windshield of Gerald's Mercedes. He drove with both hands on the wheel, jaw tight, and I knew he was calculating how much of his day this was going to consume. I sat in the passenger seat with my purse in my lap, apologizing silently for existing, for needing, for being inconvenient. The emergency room was busy. Gerald checked me in at the desk, then sat down in one of the plastic chairs, scrolling through his phone while I filled out paperwork. Every few minutes, he'd glance at his watch, I wanted to tell him he could leave, that I'd call an Uber to get home, but I also didn't want to be alone. Even after all these years of emotional distance, I still held on to this small hope that maybe when it really mattered, he'd be there. They took me back after about 40 minutes. Gerald followed, still on his phone. The nurse took my vitals, asked me questions about my symptoms, my medical history. I answered while Gerald sat in the corner of the examination room, typing emails. The nurse left and told us the doctor would be in soon. "This is taking forever," Gerald muttered. "I'm sorry," I said automatically. "I'm missing the Thompson meeting. Do you know how long we've been working on this account?" "I know. I'm sorry." The doctor came in, a young woman, maybe in her early 30s, with kind eyes and dark hair pulled back in a ponytail. Dr. Sarah Chen, according to her badge. She asked me more questions, pressed on my abdomen, frowned at my answers. Then she said she wanted to do an ultrasound and some blood work. "How long will that take?" Gerald asked before I could respond. "Hard to say," Dr. Chen said, glancing at him. "We need to figure out what's going on." "Ballpark. Could be a few hours, depending on what we find." Gerald stood up. "A few hours? I can't sit here for a few hours, Margaret." "You don't have to," I said quietly. "You can go. I'll get a cab." "Are you sure?" he asked, and I heard the relief in his voice. "I'm sure." He was gone in less than a minute. Didn't kiss me goodbye, didn't squeeze my hand, didn't say he'd come back to pick me up later. Just left. I heard his footsteps echoing down the hallway, and then they were gone, and I was alone in that sterile white room with Dr. Chen looking at me with something that might have been pity. The next few hours were a blur of tests and waiting. They found a mass on my left ovary, a large one. They needed to do more imaging, a CT scan. Dr. Chen's face got more serious with each result. She used words like concerning and we need a specialist and I'm going to call in Dr. Morrison from oncology. Oncology? Cancer? The word hung in the air like a death sentence, and I was sitting there alone in a hospital gown with an IV in my arm, and all I could think was that Gerald had left. He'd left me here. After 42 years of marriage, when I needed him most, he'd just walked out. I called him around 3 in the afternoon. The phone rang 4 times before he answered. "Margaret?" "They think it might be cancer," I said. My voice sounded strange, disconnected from my body. "What?" "Ovarian cancer. They're doing more tests, but they think—" Jesus Christ. He didn't sound concerned. He sounded angry, inconvenienced. "They want to keep me overnight, for observation and more tests tomorrow." Silence on the other end. Then, "Overnight?" "Yes." "Margaret, I have the Hendricks dinner tonight. I told you about this last week." I had no memory of him telling me about any dinner. But then again, he rarely told me anything anymore. Our marriage had become 2 separate lives happening under the same roof. "I know," I said, because it was easier than arguing. "I just thought you should know." "I'll come by tomorrow," he said. "After work." He didn't come by the next day, or the day after that. They admitted me officially on Wednesday. The tests confirmed stage 3 ovarian cancer. It had spread to my lymph nodes. Dr. Morrison, a tall man with gray hair and steady hands, explained that I would need surgery followed by aggressive chemotherapy. He used survival statistics and treatment protocols and talked about tumor markers and CA-125 levels, and I nodded like I understood. But really, I was just thinking about how Gerald hadn't answered any of my calls. I tried him Wednesday evening, straight to voicemail, Thursday morning, voicemail, Thursday afternoon, a nurse helped me try again. This time it rang, and for a moment I thought he'd answer, but then I heard his voice on the recording. "You've reached Gerald Foster. Leave a message." "Gerald, it's me," I said. "I'm still at the hospital. They're saying I need surgery next week. I really need you to call me back. Please?" He didn't. Friday morning, I called our house line. No answer. I called his work number. His assistant, Monica, picked up. "Hi, Monica. It's Margaret Foster. Is Gerald available?" A pause. "He's in a meeting, Mrs. Foster." "Can you ask him to call me? It's urgent." "Of course. I'll let him know." He never called. Saturday, I tried a different approach. I called our daughter, Rachel. She lived in Portland, worked as a graphic designer, had a husband, and 2 little boys I rarely saw. We talked maybe once a month, brief catch-up calls that felt more like obligation than connection. I'd always blamed myself for the distance between us. When she was growing up, I'd been so focused on keeping Gerald happy, on managing his moods and his needs, that maybe I hadn't been there enough for her. "Mom?" She sounded surprised. "Is everything okay?" "I'm in the hospital," I said, and my voice cracked. "I have cancer." "Oh my God! What? Where's Dad?" "I don't know. He brought me to the ER on Tuesday, and then he left, and I haven't seen him since. He won't return my calls." "What do you mean he won't return your calls?" "I mean, I've called him 15 times, and he hasn't picked up once." Silence. Then, "That's insane. Let me call him." "Thank you," I whispered. She called me back an hour later. "I can't reach him either. Mom, what the hell is going on?" "I don't know. I'm coming down there tomorrow. I'll leave first thing in the morning." "You don't have to." "Mom, I'm coming." Rachel arrived Sunday afternoon with anger in her eyes and an overnight bag slung over her shoulder. She hugged me carefully, like I might break, and then she sat down in the chair beside my hospital bed and demanded to know everything. I told her about the diagnosis, about the surgery scheduled for Tuesday, about how her father had simply vanished. "This is unbelievable," she said. "Even for him, this is unbelievable." Even for him. The phrase hurt because it acknowledged something we'd both always known, that Gerald was capable of coldness, of selfishness, of putting himself first. But this was a new level. This was abandonment. "I'm going to the house," Rachel said. "Right now. I'm going to find him and drag him back here if I have to." "Rachel." "No, Mom. No excuses this time. You have cancer. You're having surgery. He doesn't get to just disappear." She came back 3 hours later, and I knew from her face that something was wrong. "He's gone," she said flatly. "What do you mean, gone?" "I mean the house is empty. His clothes are gone, his toiletries, his laptop. There's a note on the kitchen counter." My heart stopped. "A note?" Rachel pulled a folded piece of paper from her pocket. Her hands were shaking. "Do you want me to read it?" I nodded, unable to speak. She unfolded the paper and read in a monotone voice, like she was trying to keep her emotions contained. "Margaret, I've thought about this for a long time, and I've decided I can't do this anymore. I'm 65 years old, and I don't want to spend what's left of my life taking care of an invalid. I deserve to be happy. I've contacted a divorce attorney, and you'll be hearing from them soon. The house is in both our names, so we'll have to figure that out. I've moved in with Denise. I'm sure you remember her from the office Christmas parties. We've been seeing each other for 2 years. I'm sorry it had to end this way, but I think it's for the best. Gerald." The room tilted. I heard the words, but they didn't make sense. "Denise, 2 years. Divorce attorney, I'm sorry it had to end this way." "Mom?" Rachel's voice sounded far away. "Mom, breathe." But I couldn't breathe. The walls were closing in. 42 years. I'd given him 42 years. I'd cooked his meals and ironed his shirts and listened to his work stories and organized his mother's funeral and put up with his emotional distance and his cold shoulders and his subtle put-downs. I'd made myself smaller and smaller until I was barely there at all, just a ghost moving through our house, and he'd left me. The moment I actually needed him, the moment I wasn't convenient anymore, he'd just walked away. And he'd been cheating on me. For 2 years. With Denise from accounting, the blonde woman with the loud laugh who always touched his arm at office parties. I'd noticed, of course I'd noticed, but I'd told myself I was being paranoid, jealous, ridiculous. I'd told myself it was nothing, it was something. I'm going to kill him, Rachel was saying. I swear to God, I'm going to kill him. But I barely heard her. I was too busy remembering every moment of the last 2 years, reframing every late night at work, every weekend golf trip, every time he'd pulled away when I tried to touch him. It had all been a lie. Our entire marriage had been built on a foundation of me giving and him taking, and the moment I needed something back, he'd revealed the truth. I had never mattered to him at all. I had surgery that Tuesday. Rachel stayed with me the whole time. She held my hand in pre-op and was waiting when I woke up in recovery. The surgery went as well as could be expected, Dr. Morrison said. They'd removed both ovaries, my uterus, and several lymph nodes. Now we'd wait for the pathology results and start planning chemotherapy. Gerald's divorce papers arrived at the hospital on Thursday. A courier brought them to my room while I was trying to eat Jell-O, my abdomen stitched and screaming. Rachel signed for them, read through the documents, and started crying angry tears. He wants the house, she said. He's claiming he paid for most of it, so he should get it in the settlement. And he's offering you $1,000 a month in spousal support. $1,000, Mom? You were married for 42 years. I stared at the ceiling tiles. I'd stopped crying by then. I'd moved past shock into something else, something numb and dark. He says here that your medical bills are your own responsibility. Rachel continued, her voice shaking. He's claiming that since you got sick after he decided to leave, he's not liable for any of your treatment costs. The chemotherapy started 3 weeks later. I'd been released from the hospital with a referral to an oncologist, a prescription for pain medication, and a follow-up surgery scheduled in 3 months if the chemo worked. Rachel had to go back to Portland. Her husband was taking time off work to watch the kids, but he couldn't do it indefinitely. She helped me set up in a short-term rental apartment in Tacoma, a 1-bedroom place that smelled like mildew and had thin walls that let me hear every argument the couple next door had. Gerald wouldn't let me back in the house. His lawyer had sent a restraining order claiming I'd threatened him. I hadn't. I'd never even spoken to him. But apparently showing up on what used to be my own doorstep, asking to collect my belongings, counted as harassment. Rachel went with a sheriff's deputy and collected what she could. Some clothes, some photos, my mother's jewelry. Everything else stayed. My books, my grandmother's china, the garden tools I'd used to plant every flower in that yard. Gerald kept it all. The chemotherapy was poison. They warned me it would be hard, but nothing prepared me for the reality of it. They pumped chemicals into my body that killed the cancer but killed everything else too. My hair fell out in clumps. My skin turned gray. I couldn't keep food down. I was weak and nauseous and in constant pain, and I was completely alone. Rachel called every day, but she was 3 hours away with her own family. I told her I was fine. I lied. The truth was, I wasn't fine. I was dying. Maybe not from the cancer. The doctors said the treatment was working, but from something else. From loneliness. From heartbreak. From the crushing realization that I had wasted 42 years of my life on a man who had discarded me like garbage the moment I became inconvenient. I'd sit in that awful apartment between treatments, too sick to move, and I'd think about all the choices I'd made. I'd met Gerald when I was 21, fresh out of community college with a certificate in bookkeeping. He was 23, confident, ambitious, working his way up at Merrill Lynch. He'd seemed so sure of everything, so certain about the future, and I'd been swept up in that certainty. We got married 6 months later. I'd wanted to wait, wanted to work for a few years, save some money. But Gerald said there was no point in waiting when you knew something was right. I got pregnant with Rachel 2 years later. I'd wanted to keep working, but Gerald said it didn't make sense financially. Why pay for childcare when I could stay home? So I quit my job. I'd intended to go back once Rachel started school, but by then Gerald's career was taking off and he was traveling constantly. Someone needed to be home, he said. Someone needed to manage the house, the schedules, the life admin that kept everything running smoothly. So I did. I became the someone who made everything run smoothly. And slowly, year by year, I disappeared into that role until there was nothing left of Margaret Ann Foster except the woman who made sure Gerald's life was comfortable. And now he was gone, living with Denise in some apartment downtown, probably celebrating his freedom, while I sat in a moldy rental going bald from chemo. The divorce was finalized in August. I got almost nothing. Gerald's lawyer had done their job well. They'd painted me as a woman who'd contributed nothing financially to the marriage, who'd been supported entirely by Gerald's income. The fact that I'd raised our child, managed our home, supported his career for 4 decades, none of that counted as contribution, apparently. The judge awarded me the car, a 2010 Honda Civic with 100,000 miles on it, and $2,000 a month in spousal support for 5 years. That was it. 42 years of marriage reduced to $2,000 a month for 5 years. Gerald got the house. He got his retirement accounts. He got his freedom. I got cancer and poverty. The chemo ended in September. The scans showed no evidence of disease, which should have felt like a victory but just felt hollow. I was alive technically, but I didn't feel alive. I felt like a shell, empty and brittle. I needed to find work. The $2,000 a month barely covered rent and basic expenses, and I still had medical bills piling up. But who was going to hire a 64-year-old woman with no recent work experience and no hair? I applied to dozens of places, bookkeeping positions, administrative assistant roles, receptionist jobs. No one called back. I finally got hired at a Walmart in November, stocking shelves overnight for $12 an hour. It wasn't much, but it was something. I'd put on a wig that Rachel bought me, show up at 11 p.m. and spend 8 hours lifting boxes and organizing inventory while my body screamed in protest. The surgery scars still hurt. My joints ached from the chemo. But I didn't have a choice. Sometimes, late at night, while I was stocking laundry detergent in aisle 7, I'd think about Gerald. I'd wonder if he ever thought about me, if he felt any guilt at all for what he'd done, if Denise knew that she'd gotten him because he'd abandoned his sick wife, if they laughed about it together. I'd heard through Rachel that they'd gotten married, a small ceremony in December, just a few months after our divorce was final. Rachel had found out from someone on Facebook. She'd been furious, wanted to drive down and confront him, but I'd asked her not to. What was the point? He'd made his choice. He'd shown me exactly who he was, and no amount of confrontation was going to change that. Winter came. Seattle winters are gray and wet, and that year felt especially dark. I worked my overnight shifts, came home to my apartment, slept for a few hours, and then lay awake staring at the ceiling wondering how my life had ended up here. I was 64 years old, living paycheck to paycheck, sleeping alone in a bed that smelled like someone else's cigarette smoke. I thought about ending it sometimes. Not seriously. I'd never actually do it. But the thoughts were there, What was the point of continuing? I had no money, no partner, no future, just more overnight shifts and medical bills and loneliness. But then I'd think about Rachel, about my grandsons, who I barely knew, about the possibility that maybe, somewhere down the road, there could be something good, something worth staying for. So I stayed. January brought a new problem. The apartment building was being sold. The new owners were renovating, raising the rent. I couldn't afford it. I had 2 months to find somewhere else to live, and rentals in Tacoma were expensive. Everything I looked at was either too much money or in neighborhoods that weren't safe, or both. I finally found a room for rent in a house in the Hilltop neighborhood. $400 a month, utilities included. It was just a bedroom with a shared bathroom down the hall, shared kitchen with 2 other tenants. But it was all I could afford. My life had been reduced to a single room. I moved in during a rainstorm, carrying trash bags full of clothes and a few boxes of belongings. One of my roommates, a man named David, who looked to be in his 50s, helped me carry things upstairs. He was kind, asked if I needed anything, told me where the coffee was kept. It was more kindness than Gerald had shown me in years. That night, lying in my rented room listening to rain against the window, I felt something shift. It wasn't hope exactly. It was just a small realization. I was still here. I'd survived cancer. I'd survived Gerald leaving. I'd survived the divorce, the financial devastation, the chemotherapy, the loss of everything I thought my life was. And I was still here. It wasn't much, but it was something. I kept working at Walmart. I kept putting one foot in front of the other. I started going to a cancer support group at the hospital on Tuesday evenings. There were 8 of us, mostly women, all dealing with various stages of treatment and recovery. We'd sit in a circle in a basement conference room drinking bad coffee from styrofoam cups and talking about our fears, our pain, our tiny victories. One woman, Diane, became something like a friend. She was 72, had breast cancer, and had been widowed 10 years earlier. She had this way of speaking that was both blunt and gentle, and she didn't let me wallow in self-pity. "You know what the best revenge is?" she asked me one night after group. "What?" "Living well, being happy, not giving them the power to destroy you." "I don't feel very happy," I admitted. "No, but you will. Eventually, if you choose it." Choose it. Like happiness was a decision, not a feeling. The idea seemed impossible. But slowly, over the months that followed, I started to understand what she meant. I started making small choices. I bought myself flowers at the grocery store. Cheap carnations, nothing fancy, but they made the room brighter. I started taking walks in the morning before work, just around the neighborhood, noticing the trees and the gardens and the way the light changed. I called Rachel Moore, had real conversations instead of just reassuring her I was fine. Spring came. I'd been cancer-free for a year. The doctors said the chances of recurrence were going down. My hair had grown back, short and silver. I'd stopped wearing the wig. I was working a day shift at Walmart when I saw him. Gerald. He was walking down the main aisle with a shopping cart, and Denise was beside him. She was laughing at something he'd said, touching his arm the way she always had. He looked happy, relaxed, like he didn't have a care in the world. He saw me too. Our eyes met across the store. I was wearing my blue Walmart vest, restocking packages of toilet paper. I watched as recognition crossed his face, followed by something that might have been shame, but was probably just discomfort. He looked away first, turned his cart around, and walked in the other direction. I stood there holding a package of Charmin, watching him leave, and I waited for the devastation, for the anger, the heartbreak, the overwhelming urge to chase after him and demand answers. But it didn't come. Instead, I felt nothing. No, not nothing. I felt free. Looking at him walking away with his new wife, I realized I didn't want him back. I didn't even miss him. What I missed was the life I'd thought I had, the illusion of partnership and security. But that had never been real. Gerald had shown me the truth. I had been alone in that marriage for years. I just hadn't known it yet. I finished my shift. I drove back to my rented room in my old Honda. I made myself dinner, just pasta and jarred sauce, nothing special. And I sat at the small desk by the window, eating and watching the sunset turn the sky orange and pink, and I thought, I'm okay. I'm actually okay. It's been 3 years now. I'm 67 years old. I still work at Walmart, but I've been promoted to supervisor. It's not a career, but it's steady and it pays the bills. I've moved to a better apartment, a studio that's small but clean and all mine. I've gotten to know my grandsons. Rachel brings them to visit every few months, and we video chat every week. They call me Grandma and show me their drawings and tell me about school, and those calls are the highlight of my week. I still go to the cancer support group, though now I'm one of the veterans. I help the new people navigate the fear and the uncertainty. I tell them what Diane told me. You can choose to live well. It won't happen overnight, and it won't be easy, but you can choose it. I heard through Rachel that Gerald had a heart attack last year. He survived, but it scared him. She said Denise told someone who told someone else that he'd cried, that he'd said he had regrets about how things ended with me. I don't know if that's true. I don't particularly care. I don't think about revenge anymore. I don't fantasize about him realizing what he lost or coming back begging for forgiveness. That's not my story. My story is that I survived. I survived a marriage that made me invisible. I survived cancer. I survived abandonment and poverty and the complete destruction of the life I thought I'd have. And on the other side of all that survival, I found something I'd never had before. Myself. Not Gerald's wife. Not the woman who made his life comfortable. Just Margaret. Just me. I planted a small garden on my apartment balcony this spring. Tomatoes, basil, some flowers. Every morning I water them and watch them grow. And I think about how strong things can be even when they start from almost nothing. How you can take a tiny seed and give it soil and water and sunlight, and it becomes something beautiful. That's what I'm doing now. I'm growing. At 67, after everything I've lost, I'm finally growing into the person I was supposed to be all along. Gerald left me at the hospital and never came back. It was the most painful thing that's ever happened to me. But it was also, in a strange way, the moment I got my life back, the moment I stopped disappearing and started becoming real. I'm not grateful for what he did. I'm not grateful for the cancer or the poverty or the loneliness, but I'm grateful for what I found on the other side of it. A small, quiet life that belongs entirely to me. A life where I matter, where my voice counts, where I'm not invisible anymore. And every morning when I wake up, I choose to keep building that life. One small decision at a time, one day at a time. That's my victory. Not revenge, not vindication. Just this. I'm still here. I survived, and I'm learning slowly how to be happy.